terror in the morgue. Anna, John, Mike, and Rachel arrive at the haunted Bell Hotel with excitement and curiosity, eager to experience the rumored paranormal activity. As they check in at the front desk, they notice that the hotel is old and run down, with a musty smell and a creepy atmosphere. The hotel staff seems nervous and jittery as they guide the group to their rooms, warning them not to wander around the hotel at night. Anna and her friends dismiss the warning, thinking it's just part of the thrill. As they settle into their rooms, strange things begin to happen. Doors slam shut, lights flicker, and eerie whispers can be heard in the halls. They soon realize that the hotel is indeed haunted, and they are not alone. Anna and her friends start to feel uneasy and scared, but they decide to investigate the source of the paranormal activity. They explore the hotel and eventually find their way to room 218, where Michael, the deceased construction worker, reportedly haunts. As they enter the room, they feel a chilling presence and hear strange noises. Suddenly, Michael's ghost appears before them, startling them and sending them running out of the room in terror. The group realizes that they may have bitten off more than they can chew, and they wonder what other terrors await them in the haunted Bell Hotel. Anna, John, Mike, and Rachel continue to experience paranormal activity throughout the night, but they try to ignore it and get some rest. However, they are awakened by strange noises coming from the basement of the hotel. They decide to investigate and make their way down to the basement. As they explore the basement, they find a room filled with old medical equipment, and they realize that it used to be the morgue for the Johnson Cancer Hospital. The group starts to feel uneasy as they look around the room, sensing that something is not quite right. Suddenly, they hear a faint whisper and turn to see a ghostly figure of a patient who died under Mark Johnson's care. The figure leads them to a hidden room, where they find a stack of medical records that detail the horrific experiments and treatments that Johnson conducted on his patients. The group is horrified by what they discover, and they realize that the hotel is a site of unspeakable horror. They vow to uncover the truth behind the Johnson Cancer Hospital and to put an end to the haunting of the Bell Hotel. But as they continue to investigate, they realize that their lives are in danger and that they may not make it out of the hotel alive. Anna, John, Mike, and Rachel return to their rooms after their discovery in the basement, feeling unnerved and on edge. However, their night of terror is far from over. As they try to get some sleep, they hear strange noises and voices that seem to be coming from inside their own rooms. They also experience sudden drops in temperature, despite the fact that the heating system in the hotel is working properly. The group realizes that the ghostly presence in the hotel is becoming more powerful and malevolent. Things take a turn for the worse when they discover that they are locked inside their rooms and cannot escape. They try to call for help, but their phones have no signal. Panic sets in as they realize that they are trapped and at the mercy of the vengeful spirits in the hotel. Suddenly, they hear a loud banging on their doors and windows, as if something is trying to break in. They huddle together in fear, unsure of what to do next. But then, Anna remembers the medical records they found in the basement and realizes that there may be a way to put an end to the haunting. The group sets out to find more evidence and hopefully discover a way to stop the malevolent spirits before it's too late. But as they venture further into the hotel, they realize that the haunting is more sinister and powerful than they ever imagined. After narrowly escaping the malevolent spirits in the hotel, Anna, John, Mike, and Rachel are determined to find a way to stop the haunting. They start to search for any information they can find about Mark Johnson and the Johnson Cancer Hospital. They decide to split up and search different parts of the hotel. Anna and Rachel head to the hotel's library to see if they can find any information about the hospital or Johnson's fraudulent practices. Meanwhile, John and Mike search the hotel's office for any documents or records related to Johnson. As Anna and Rachel search the library, they hear strange whispers and footsteps, but they try to ignore them and continue their search. They finally come across a book with a hidden compartment that contains a diary belonging to one of Johnson's former patients. The diary reveals that Johnson was experimenting on his patients and that some of them were buried alive in the hotel's basement. Meanwhile, John and Mike find a locked drawer in the hotel's office. After breaking it open, they find an old file containing medical records of Johnson's patients, including Michael, the worker who was killed during the hotel's construction. The file reveals that Michael was not an accident, but was actually murdered by Johnson to cover up his medical experiments. The group reunites and shares their findings. They realize that the only way to stop the haunting is to confront the malevolent spirits and put their souls to rest. With their newfound knowledge, they set out to uncover the truth about the hospital and the spirits haunting the hotel. With their newfound information, the group decides to investigate the hotel's basement, where the makeshift morgue was located. They find an old elevator that leads down to the basement and cautiously make their way down. As they explore the dark, eerie basement, they hear strange noises and see unexplainable movements out of the corner of their eyes. Suddenly, they hear a blood-curdling scream, followed by a ghostly figure emerging from the shadows. The group realizes that they have disturbed the spirits of Johnson's former patients, who are now seeking revenge. The spirits start to attack the group, causing them to flee deeper into the basement. As they run, they find a hidden room where Johnson had conducted his experiments. The walls are covered in strange symbols and diagrams, and there are tables with restraints and surgical tools scattered about. The group realizes that this is where Johnson had conducted his experiments on his patients. Suddenly, the spirits catch up to the group and surround them, trapping them in the room. They are faced with a terrifying realization: they might not make it out of the hotel alive. Just as the spirits are about to attack, Anna notices a small wooden box on one of the tables. She opens it and finds a small silver key inside. She realizes that this key might be the only way to stop the haunting and put the spirits to rest. The group decides to make a run for it, but they are chased by the spirits. As they reach the elevator, they insert the silver key into the control panel, hoping that it will stop the haunting and end their terror. The elevator doors open, and the group steps out onto the hotel's first floor. Suddenly, they hear the sound of shuffling footsteps behind them, and they turn around to see a group of ghostly figures standing in front of them. The group realizes that the spirits have followed them out of the basement and are now blocking their way out of the hotel. They try to run, but the spirits seem to be everywhere, surrounding them and blocking their every move. As they try to find a way out, they notice that one of the spirits is the ghost of Michael, the worker who died during the hotel's construction. Michael seems to be trying to communicate something to the group, but they can't understand what he's saying. Suddenly, Anna has an idea. She remembers a book that she had read about the hotel's history, which mentioned a ritual that could be performed to put the spirits to rest. She tells the group that they need to find a special object that Johnson had used in his experiments and that it was hidden somewhere in the hotel. The group splits up to search for the object, with Anna and John going to the hotel's library and the others searching the guest rooms. After some time, Anna and John find a book that reveals the location of the object. It is hidden inside a secret room on the hotel's top floor. The group rushes to the top floor and finds the secret room. Inside, they find the object, a small silver chalice with strange symbols etched onto its surface. They realize that this is what they need to perform the ritual. As they hold the chalice, they feel a strange energy coursing through their bodies. They recite the incantation that Anna had found in the book, and suddenly, the spirits start to dissipate into thin air. The haunting is over, and the hotel is finally at peace. The group leaves the hotel, relieved to have survived the terrifying experience. They know that they will never forget the horror they faced that night, but they also know that they have put the spirits to rest and have finally given the victims of Johnson's medical fraud the peace they deserve. As the group of friends entered the basement, they noticed that the atmosphere had changed. The air was heavy and damp, and the sound of their footsteps echoed eerily throughout the space. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise coming from the morgue, like something was dragging across the floor. The group cautiously approached the morgue and pushed the door open. The room was dark, and the only light came from a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. They could barely see anything, but they could hear the noise more clearly now. It sounded like something was being dragged across the floor, and it was coming from one of the metal tables. One of the friends bravely approached the table and lifted the sheet that covered it. To their horror, they saw that one of the bodies was missing. The tray on which it had been resting was empty, and there were drag marks leading away from it. Suddenly, they heard a low growl coming from the shadows, and the friends quickly realized that they were not alone in the morgue. They fumbled for their flashlights, and when they turned them on, they saw a figure lurking in the darkness. It was a man, but he was covered in blood, and his eyes were hollow and lifeless. The group froze in fear as the man started to shuffle towards them, groaning and moaning. They realized too late that they had disturbed something in the morgue that was not meant to be disturbed. After finding the note, Jane and John decide to take matters into their own hands and investigate the strange occurrences happening at the hotel. They start by researching the hotel's history and discover the dark past of Mark Johnson and his Johnson Cancer Hospital. The more they learn, the more they become convinced that the spirits of the patients who died under Johnson's care are still haunting the hotel. As they dig deeper, Jane and John start to experience strange happenings themselves. They hear voices whispering their names and footsteps echoing down empty hallways. They also start to see apparitions of patients in hospital gowns, some of them pointing in the direction of the basement. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Jane and John decide to explore the basement. As they make their way down the stairs, they start to feel a cold breeze and notice an eerie silence that makes their hairs stand on end. When they finally reach the bottom, they find themselves in the old morgue, surrounded by rusty tools and creaky metal tables. Suddenly, they hear a loud banging noise coming from one of the storage rooms. Bravely, they approach the room and slowly open the door. Inside, they find a pile of old medical records and a ghostly figure of a patient who seems to be trying to communicate with them. As they search the basement, Mark notices a room that is not on the hotel's floor plan. He decides to investigate it and finds himself in a large, cold room filled with medical equipment and empty metal tables. The room gives him chills, and he feels like he's being watched. Suddenly, he hears footsteps and sees a shadow moving in the corner of his eye. He turns around, but there's no one there. As he's about to leave the room, Mark hears a faint whisper. He freezes, not knowing what to do. The whisper gets louder, and he can make out a woman's voice saying, "Help me." Mark realizes that the voice is coming from one of the metal tables. As he moves closer, he sees a body lying on it. The body is of a woman who appears to have died recently. Mark is terrified and unsure of what to do. He looks around the room and notices medical records scattered on the floor. He picks them up and begins to read them. As he reads, he discovers that the woman on the table was one of Mark's patients. She had come to him for treatment, but died under his care. Mark realizes that she is one of the many patients that Mark had buried in the makeshift morgue in the basement. Mark is overwhelmed with guilt and fear. He knows that he needs to leave the room immediately, but he can't bring himself to move. Suddenly, he hears a creaking noise and turns to see the body sitting up on the table, staring at him with empty eyes. Mark screams and runs out of the room, knowing that he needs to get out of the hotel as soon as possible. Ben couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the Johnson Cancer Hospital. Despite his fear, he felt a strong urge to explore the basement where the makeshift morgue was located. He sneaks down there and found some old medical records, including death certificates and patient records. While going through the records, he noticed that there were a lot more deaths than the publicized number of patients that Johnson claimed to have treated. As he dug deeper, he realized that Johnson's treatment methods were not only unorthodox, but they were also barbaric. He found records of experimental treatments on patients that included painful and dangerous procedures. Ben also found records of patients who were treated for illnesses that they never had, leading to their deaths. Ben was horrified by what he found and realized that the spirits of the patients were not the only ones haunting the hotel. He knew he had to get this information out, but he had to do it carefully. He had no idea who he could trust or how deep the corruption went. Ben's heart raced as he made his way back to his room, knowing that he was in grave danger. Little did he know that he was being watched the whole time. As Sarah and John continued their exploration of the basement, they stumbled upon a locked room with a heavy metal door. Despite their initial apprehension, they were determined to investigate and find out what was inside. Using a crowbar and some brute force, they managed to break open the door. Inside the room, they found what appeared to be a makeshift laboratory. There were tables covered in strange equipment and chemicals, as well as various notes and papers strewn about. Upon closer inspection, they realized that the papers were medical records and autopsy reports of some of Johnson's patients. As they dug deeper, they discovered a hidden room behind a false wall. Inside this room, they found something that chilled them to the bone. There were rows of shelves containing jars filled with human organs and body parts. It was clear that this was where Johnson had conducted his gruesome experiments and harvested organs from his deceased patients. Sarah and John were horrified by what they had found and knew that they needed to get out of there as soon as possible. But as they made their way back to the main staircase, they heard a faint whispering coming from somewhere deep in the basement. They froze, unsure of what to do next. As Detective Carter and Officer Johnson walk around the morgue, they hear strange noises and see apparitions. Suddenly, a gust of wind blows out all the candles, and the room is plunged into darkness. The two officers stumble around in the dark, trying to find their way out. Just when they think they are lost forever, they spot a faint light in the distance. As they move closer, they realize it's coming from the basement of the hotel. When they reach the basement, they discover a hidden room filled with medical equipment and files. As they sift through the files, they discover that Mark Johnson had been experimenting on his patients, using them as guinea pigs to test his supposed cancer cure. When the patients died, he would bury them in the basement, where their spirits remained trapped. The officers realized that Michael's ghost had been trying to reveal the truth about Johnson's experiments all along, and they make plans to bring Johnson to justice for his crimes. But as they leave the basement, they hear a voice whisper, "You can't leave yet. You belong to me now." They turn around to find themselves face to face with the vengeful spirit of Mark Johnson himself. After hours of intense research, Laura and the detective team finally found a document revealing the real reason behind the hospital's closure. The document showed that the owner, Mark Johnson, had used patients as human guinea pigs in his attempts to find a cure for cancer. The patients' bodies were used for experiments, and many were buried in the basement, which is now the hotel's morgue. The team discovered that Mark Johnson's spirit still haunts the morgue, and he has been responsible for the recent hauntings in the hotel. Laura and the detective team realize that they need to confront Mark Johnson's ghost to put an end to the haunting. They make a plan to lure him into the morgue by leaving a trail of blood from the hotel's kitchen to the morgue. As they wait, they hear footsteps getting louder and louder until the ghost finally appears. Mark Johnson's ghost is furious and tries to attack them. They realize that the only way to stop him is to destroy the document that revealed his true intentions. They search for the document, and after a few tense moments, they finally find it. They burn the document, and Mark Johnson's ghost starts to disappear. Laura and the team are relieved that the haunting is over, and they leave the hotel as quickly as possible. As they exit the hotel, they notice a man watching them from the shadows. He introduces himself as Michael, the worker who died during the hotel's construction, and thanks them for finally putting Mark Johnson's spirit to rest. Laura and the detective team leave the hotel, happy to have put an end to the haunting, but also a little unnerved by the man they met at the end. As the group stood in terror, they watched as the metal slab covering the entrance to the morgue slowly slid to the side, revealing the dark and foreboding room. The stench of death filled the air, and the sound of footsteps echoed from within. The group was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Michael, the ghost of the construction worker who had died during the building of the hotel. He appeared to be angry and was muttering incoherent words. The group tried to back away, but they were trapped between Michael and the entrance to the morgue. Just when they thought they were done for, they heard a loud scream coming from inside the morgue. It was Mark Johnson, the infamous medical fraud who had turned the hotel into a hospital. He had risen from the dead and was now coming for them. The group was now faced with a difficult decision: stay and fight or run for their lives. They decided to make a run for it, and as they fled, they heard the screams and moans of the spirits of the patients who had died under Johnson's care. Eventually, they made it out of the hotel, but they knew they could never return. The horrors they had witnessed would stay with them forever. They reported what they had seen to the authorities, but the hotel remained open, and many more guests would spend the night there, unaware of the terror that awaited them. As the group enters the basement, they notice a foul stench emanating from the makeshift morgue. The air is thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, they hear a low growl, and a shadowy figure emerges from the darkness. It is the ghost of Mark Johnson, the former owner of the hotel and cancer hospital. He is enraged that the group has disturbed the spirits of his patients and threatens to make them suffer the same fate. But before he can make a move, one of the members bravely steps forward and confronts him. She tells him that he has no right to take revenge on innocent people and that he must face the consequences of his actions. Mark Johnson is momentarily stunned, but then his face contorts into an angry snarl. He lunges at the group, but they are prepared. They have brought with them items that are known to repel spirits, and they use them to fend him off. Finally, after a tense few moments, Mark Johnson's spirit dissipates into thin air. The group is relieved and elated, but also sad for the souls that were trapped in the morgue. They say a prayer for the departed and make their way out of the hotel, grateful for the experience, but also glad to be alive. As they step out into the fresh air, the group is greeted by a beautiful sunrise, a symbol of a new beginning. They realize that they have formed a bond that will last a lifetime, and that they have all been changed by their shared experience. They say goodbye to each other, promising to stay in touch, and then go their separate ways, forever united by their encounter with the terror in the morgue.